have come up with a topic for conversation that more people have evidenced a keener interest in than anything I can think of. And our topic has to do with what we've come to call the golden days of radio. The days of the big radio programs, the dramatic shows and the comedy shows and the big musical shows and the mystery shows. And so many remember today, and those who are too young to remember still have a fatal fascination for these shows. In the past weeks, we've talked to Edgar Bergen and Carlton E. Morris and Vic Knight, who produced some of the biggest shows that ever were, and Fibber McGee, that was Jim Jordan. And today, a very, very interesting radio performer who actually started here in the Bay Area because he was born in San Leandro. His name is Harold Peary, and he played for many, many years on one of the top-rated shows called The Great Gildersleeve. And now he lives down south in Manhattan Beach, but sounds exactly the same. Are you there, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I am. How are you, Jack?
I'm very well, sir. How are you?
Fine. That's honorary mayor, by the way.
The honorary mayor?
Yes, I'm also the honorary mayor of San Leandro, where I was born.
But you weren't the honorary mayor of Wistful Vista.
And, no, I was the water commissioner of Summerfield, but I also did play at one time Mayor Appleby on Fibber McGee, which later became Mayor Latrivia, which was played by Gail Gordon on radio, and which I played on the Fibber McGee and Molly television show.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, Mayor Latrivia.
Wasn't there kind of a weight situation there when you were doing The Great Gildersleeve? Weren't you underweight?
Underweight? No, I weighed 227 in those days. But when I first started playing Gildersleeve on Fibber McGee, I only weighed about 180, something like that. That was in 37. And when I started doing my own show in 41, The Great Gildersleeve on radio, I was still a little puny looking to play the fat man that they used to call me. So I, for the motion picture's sake, I started gaining weight, which is very easy for me. And I went up to 227. And I did 6 different pictures at Gildersleeve. And when I quit them in 1945, I took 50 pounds off. And I only weigh about 183 now.
For heaven's sakes.
Yeah, I've tried to keep it off ever since. Getting a little ancient now, you know.
I don't believe that.
Well, I am.
How did you start? How did you first get your start with Fibber McGee?
Well, I went to Chicago in '35 to do soap operas and kids shows. You know, a friend of mine by the name of Ted Maxwell and his wife had gone to Chicago. They were from NBC in San Francisco. And she was doing Bobby Dean. They're both passed away a few years ago. She was doing Orphan Annie. Mm-hmm. And she was transferred to Chicago. And so I happened to go to Chicago after I left NBC in San Francisco on my way to go to New York. I stopped off in Chicago, and it was so lucrative, the soap operas and the kids shows, I just stayed right there. Mm-hmm. And then Fibber McGee went on in 1935, the year I arrived there, but I actually didn't work with him until 1937. And after doing various characters like Mayor Appleby, which McGee called Apple Puss, mm-hmm. and I even did a Portuguese piccolo player in Ted Weems' band. That's when Perry Como was on it.
Now, was this on the Fibber McGee show?
Yes. Ted Weems' band with Country Washburn and Perry Como and Elmo Tanner. They were all on the show on Fibber McGee in those days. And
you played the character of a Portuguese piccolo player.
Piccolo player. It was just a small part. I was doing other things, you know.
Did you do dialects at that time?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I did many dialects in San Francisco, and in one of the reasons I found it lucrative in Chicago was that I was one of the few that could play Japanese and Chinese dialects. And I went to town for a while. Mm-hmm. I played Li Lu, a little Chinese character on Tom Mix. And I played many Japanese characters and used to get darn good fan mail, and nobody was ever offended. Well, I lived in the Bay Area, you know, all my life until I grew up, you know, and so I knew the Japanese and the Chinese very well, and even knew some of the idioms in their language, you know.
But the Fibber McGee thing was really your big break.
Yes. Well, actually, I was doing very well as a radio actor in Chicago and had a lot of shows, and Fibber McGee actually started me into something that I could hang on to and just forget that I was versatile and just grab something and carry it, you know. Mm-hmm. And when they came to California in '39, I was delighted because I wanted to come home, and I came with them, and the character was built up because Marion Jordan, who was playing Molly, was quite ill at the time, And so they built up a great many of the other characters.
You know, he speaks very, very wistfully and tenderly of his wife, who passed away some years ago.
Yes.
I got the feeling, talking to Jim Jordan, that he and his wife were very, very close, professionally and non-professionally.
That's very true. They were quite a team, you know, in real life as well. And I know that Jim is very happily married now to a very lovely woman. But I imagine, you know, after the association professionally and domestically, why, he, as you say, speaks very wistfully of her. She was a fine woman, by the way. Everybody loved her. Right?
Mm-hmm. Al, he said something that I found rather not difficult to believe, but that surprised me. He gave the impression that the show, Fibber McGee and Molly, was very tightly written, very closely written and supervised, and that he and his wife are really no more than an actor and an actress, that they did very little in the way of creating anything.
Well, I think that he was being pretty modest in that case, because I sat in on a great many script sessions. We all did, you know, because Don Quinn, the writer, loved to have people come in and boot around little ideas, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill Thompson and myself and the producer, Cecil Underwood, who I happened to get on the show, by the way. He was originally from here in San Francisco, and he wanted to come east, and they needed a new producer. And I was the one that got him the job. He later produced my show for many years, too, for the agency. Everybody kicked around ideas, and Jim and Marion were great critics, I can say. I must say it that way, because Don Quinn, who's a great writer, was inclined to go overboard a little bit occasionally. You know, he had to have somebody hold him down, and they did. Jim in particular. Jim, it was the kind of a fellow that if you'd asked him point blank if it was raining outside, he'd say, "Well, I'll have to go out and look," you know. So this was great, and I think he was just being a little humble about the whole thing, because I happen to know that he created a great many things, and he had some wonderful standard lines that he would always want to use, and he was a great ad-libber. One of the reasons the character of Gildersleeve became popular was because one night when we were out there, Jim and I had the last scene, and the producer suddenly signaled us that we were going to get off the air too fast if we hurried. Start stretching. And we started stretching, and I threw in that laugh for the first time, which I'd used in other shows. Started in San Francisco, as a matter of fact. And the audience were with me. So Jim looked at me, and I ad-libbed something about a little chum, and laughed again. And after I laughed about the third time, you know, I practically was co-starred the next week. That's how those things usually happen. You know?
Hal, what kind of money did a top radio performer in the 1930s, like a Fibber McGee, what kind of money did they make?
Well, I don't know exactly how they started, but I imagine when that show first started, that they probably were making something like $1,500 a week for the team. It later was something like $10,000 a week before they got off the air.
Oh boy!
You know, it was a thing that progressed, and of course they had an interest in the show. You know, they owned the show as well as there were three people that owned it: Fibber McGee and Molly and Don Quinn. And one of the reasons that I never owned the name Gildersleeve, because it became a part and parcel of that package. And when I went on for another sponsor, it was still retained by that package, and then was sold to Kraft, and I didn't participate.
So you
I don't
never
say that with any bitterness or anything.
No, I understand, but you never owned Gildersleeve.
No, I didn't. That's why I ultimately left it, and somebody else played it for a short time.
Jim Jordan told me, incidentally, that he has sold Fibber McGee and Molly. That no longer belongs to him.
That's right. They sold that many years ago. Don, the three of them sold it, and it was probably some kind of a deal that was profitable to them in a tax-wise way. Capital gains or something like that. I don't really know the story on it, but I know that NBC acquired it.
Well, then how
did a television show with two other people.
How did you, as the great Gildersleeve, then go on to your own very successful show?
Well, it was the same advertising agency, and when actually I auditioned to replace Fibber McGee for the summer in 1941, and that's how we happened to build a show for the summer. You see, and a man by the name of Ransom Sherman had a show that he auditioned against me, and he won. And he went on the air for Fibber McGee, and I didn't in the summer, and everybody was delighted, including me, because I didn't particularly want to do a show of my own. Well, the agency were a little upset about it, and they went out and sold it to Kraft Foods. So a month later, I found out I was on the air, and I wasn't on Fibber McGee anymore. So in the fall of 1941, after losing the audition to replace Fibber for the summer, I went on in my own show and was starred for 11 years as Great Gildersleeve for the same product, by the way.
What was the Ransom Sherman program that beat you out in the audition?
It was just kind of a variety show, and Mr. Johnson of Johnson's Wax liked Ransom Sherman, and he didn't want me to leave Fibber McGee and Molly. I'm surprised that later he did let me go. I think it was because he was a little chagrined about the whole thing.
Then you did Gildersleeve for 11 years.
11 years, and I did 7 pictures at RKO and 2 at Republic and 1 at Paramount in the character of Gildersleeve. And then I left the show in 51. From 41 to 51, there was 11 seasons, however. I left the show and did a show for CBS radio called Honest Harold, with the Harold Peary show, for a year and a half. And radio started to go then, you know, as far as shows, big comedy shows that paid big money. So I laid off for a while. I went to Europe and did some pictures, and then I came back and built a show for television, which didn't sell. And in the meantime, I've been on many things. Like I was on the Blondie show for 2 seasons as Dagwood's friend next door, whose name I can't think of right now. Oh, Woodley. Herb Woodley, yeah, the stinker. And then I did the Fibber McGee and Molly TV series in 1960. Did 29 of those as Mayor Latrivia, and that's how I came to be honorary mayor of Manhattan Beach and honorary mayor of San Leandro. It was a tie-up, you know.
Was the Fibber McGee and Molly television show successful?
I think it was successful, but it had some very, very tough competition. A show called Dobie Gillis. It was on CBS, and they had a better rating, and they were spending so much money on Fibber McGee and Molly, it was an expensive show, that they decided to let it go. And then it later was on the air 5 times a week, you know, got some lovely residuals out of it for about a year and a half.
But don't you think that a show that's so well established on radio and then goes on television is competing with itself, and that no television show can really produce the images that were produced for the listener on radio?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, because radio makes you think, and you build up your own ideas and impressions, and sometimes you're sadly disillusioned.
Right.
I always, I never wanted to do Gildersleeve on television unless I owned it, of course, because I felt that way, because all the pictures that I did, of course, they were A products, and they used a lot of care, you know, in building the characters. Even the series that I did, we spent 6 weeks on them, you know. Where a television show, you know, you do it in 4 days, and in the days when I wanted to do it, we were doing them in 3 days.
Oh boy!
So you know, I was afraid, and unless I owned it and could dictate the policy a little bit, I didn't particularly want to do it, and that's how it happened that a chap by the name of Willard Waterman, a very good friend of mine, by the way, did it. And they made 39 episodes, and they showed 11, and the rest of them are in little cans at NBC someplace. I understand they fired somebody over that.
You know, you mentioned when you noticed or when you saw first that radio was on its way out. Now, radio, you'd been in it a long time, and it had been very good to you. What was your feeling about radio, about the whole change in the industry?
Well, I could see that the handwriting on the wall was in as far as money. Several of the 2 networks asked me to build shows after I left CBS, package shows, and after I got my bookkeeper and, you know, and several people working on the packages, I found out that everybody else was going to do very well, and Harold Peary might be working for nothing every week, you know.
But I can't believe it was all money. You can't have spent all those years without some sort of love for the medium. I know you had
I
that.
still love it, and I'd be working in it right now if I could get a job. I was a disc jockey, you know, for several years.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, I was at WMGM in New York in 1954 and part of 55. I had 2 different shows, a morning show, and then I subbed for a gentleman who was Ted, the sportscaster that passed away.
Husing?
Husing. He had a nighttime show, and the first time he was operated on, I subbed for him for a little while on a nighttime show. And then I came back, on the strength of that, I came, KABC, which is the ABC outlet here in radio, brought me in, and I was a disc jockey for 11 and a half months here at KABC. 55 and part of 56. And then that's when I did the Blondie series, and I had to give up the disc jockey stint because I was on from 6 to 9 a.m., and I was doing the set on Blondie at 8 o'clock, you know.
Oh, boy.
Then I had a piece of a small radio station in Tucson, Arizona, and I used to tape a show in Hollywood, and it was called the Tony Peary Show. Tony was a fellow who was a disc jockey in Tucson. It was called the Tony Peary Show with Harold Peary.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to do part of it here, and he did the rest of it there.
Oh.
And it was quite successful because we had scads of interviews with, you know, a lot of celebrities and recording stars. And then we decided to sell the station, and so that was the last I actually have done in radio, with the possible exception of commercials. And I did a series with Arch Oboler a couple of years ago that ran on Mutual Network.
Uh-huh. Well, it sounds to me like you haven't slowed down in 35 years.
Well, I hope I don't have to, you know. I work as much as I can in pictures and television, if they'll pay the, you know, the stipend, because I can't work for what I'd like to work for, because you get better parts.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to keep up a certain amount of dignity, you know.
Do you think... Go ahead.
I just did a picture, by the way, with Elvis Presley called Clam Bake, which will be released soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going into a documentary, I think, next week. Television.
So you're still very busy as a performer.
Well, yeah, I do an awful lot of personal appearances and MC jobs, luncheons and dinners, and I'm even hired to do campaign rallies every once in a while. When they'll pay you to do one of those, why, I guess they want you.
There you are.
Yeah, and this month I'm going to be 59 years old.
59.
Yeah, and I feel very happy about the whole bit, and I've just been married again for the third time. Love is wonderful the third time around.
I'll have to take your word on that.
Yeah, I married a little electronics engineer here in Beverly, in Manhattan Beach.
Uh-huh.
And we're very happy. As a matter of fact, she's sitting here on the floor. We were cleaning the pool, what you call.
Oh.
And we're in our dungarees and stuff, and she's sitting here right now listening.
Well, before I let you get away, you must do something for me.
Sure.
Can't you guess what it is?
Well, all right.
That was it. Would you do it once more?
Sure. Leroy. Say hello to everybody in San Leandro.
I will. Anybody specifically?
Well, I have an aunt that lives Aunt Rosaline Correa, that lives right on the dividing line between Oakland and San Leandro, and I just finished writing her a letter, and she's a great radio fan, so she may be hearing this.
Well, let's hope so.
All right.
Hal Peary, you've been very gracious. Thank you so much. And when you're in this area, will you come in and say hello?
Sure will. We're coming up in about a month, and we'll give you a call.
We're in the Fairmont Hotel.
Yeah, I know exactly where it is.
Thanks again.
All right, Jack.
Right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hal Peary, the great Gildersleeve.